Welcome to another episode of Threads of Enlightenment. As usual, I like to stop and thank my guests for coming because I know they're coming with a couple of things I personally deem very important. Time. Byron, thank you. Byron, thank you for coming and sharing some of that commodity because it's so expensive that a lot of people don't know how to utilize it and use it for their benefit. And we see this all day long. And the other is your journey. That housed who you were and made you who you are today. And so we are really honored and privileged to have you here to share some of that with us so that we can better be acquainted with you, but also learn from you of your wisdom and how you overcame so that those that are listening and in similar situation can also stand up and be counted and get into your space so that you can assist them to walk and become the best representation of themselves. Thank you so much for coming to Threads of Enlightenment.
Thanks so much for having me here. I'm really excited to be joining you today.
Thank you. Tell the people the things that you have created. I've been telling them that we are creators so far. So just tell them the things that you have given birth to, if you will, and so that they can see what you have achieved as a result of your journey.
Well, over the last decade, I've been doing what I'm doing now. I've written 3 best-selling books. I'm about to release my 4th book, which is called Maybe You Should Give Up 7 Ways to Get Out of Your Own Way and Take Control of Your Life. And I've also been fortunate at this point to work with CEOs, entrepreneurs, and business leaders in 15 different countries to really help them get out of their own way so they can break through to the next level of success. So whether that's been with my one-to-one coaching or my courses, everything I've done has been about helping people really actually become the best version of themselves. So I'm excited to dive into it today and give the listeners some actionable insights so that they can start that journey themselves.
Excellent. I know self-sabotage is a big principle, if you will, that people have to recognize. And a lot of that behavior is programmed within their mindset, and they're not even aware that they're doing that to themselves, but they find themselves never getting to that next level. So I'm excited for you to give us some pointers on that. I want you to go back and introduce us to your family, that first unit that you were introduced to while you're here on this earth. I tell people that there are a couple of different entities that are vying for our attention to program us: family, we have religion, we have society, we have culture, we have all these different entities outside of us that are trying to program us to tell us that we ought to be normal, Byron. And so I just hate that terminology, normal. But introduce us to your family, and so that we can see where you were brought into and how you manage yourself there.
Yes, I've been really, really fortunate with the family that I grew up with. I originally actually come from South Africa, but my parents, when I was younger, realized that there wasn't really going to be a future for that. So we decided to leave when I was 10 years old. They brought us across to the UK. I've always had a really small family of just my parents, but they've also been the rocks who've really pushed and helped me and supported me in everything that I'm doing. So I wouldn't be here today or like doing the work that I'm doing without their guidance and support. Like they've been an integral role in helping me become the man that I am.
That is awesome. I mean, it is really important that you have that foundation, especially when that foundation is your parents and where you can be able to step on and build from there. So, talk to us as you had this foundation and you are being cared for in the sense of all of the things that one would look for a parents. How was your relationship with others based from your relationship with your parents? How did you relate to your friends and those outside of your family?
I think one of the big challenges as a kid when you're an only child is actually relating to other people around you. I think for me, like that was one of those things, especially like growing up in a very, very small family. It was always like when I met other people, I was far more used to being around adults than kids as I was growing up. I think that for me
Mm.
helped me get a maturity that allowed me to actually thrive in the world that I'm doing, especially as my parents are both like successful professionals. That gave me a lot of exposure to the working world, which I use in my own work today. And I think that played a massive role in just forming
Yeah.
my shape of mentally of what's possible and who I wanted to become.
That is awesome. So, how young were you when you began to um, see yourself out in the space of what we call out in the world? How young were you, and what were your thought patterns as to what that world looked like when you began to formulate your thought life?
Yeah. So my thought patterns over the last couple of decades have actually changed massively. I think part of the problem when I was younger is I did have the thought pattern of doing what was expected of me. I finished school, went to
Hmm.
university, I got a job, did all of the things I felt like I was supposed to be doing. But as a result of it, I actually found myself in a
Yeah.
situation where I was deeply unhappy. I reached a point in my career where I was burnt out, I was exhausted, I was going through the motions, and I really knew that I was capable of so much more, but I just felt stuck. And going back to the topic of family, like the big turning point in my own life actually related to my dad. He got cancer. During his treatment, he had most of his bowel
Hmm.
surgically removed, and he spent 25 days in ICU, most of that on life support and breathing through a tracheostomy. And luckily, he pulled through, which is something I'm eternally grateful for. But that was the big wake up call for me
Yeah.
that something had to change. Like that was the catalyst in my own life that took me down a path where I realized, you know what, I have
Hmm.
to get my life on track. I had needed to lose weight. I needed to get my health in check. I needed to find something that was fulfilling because I realized how short and fragile life actually is. So, yeah, I've had very much
Wow.
shifted thought patterns of the world of what's expected of us and actually then what's possible.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. That's what I said in the onset. This normal behavior where we go to school and we get our degree and we move forward in that state of normal living. What, where did you gravitate to as far as your field of study, and why did you gravitate towards that?
So my background is I originally did a master's degree in business, and then post that I was working in corporate marketing. So that for me was
Hmm.
just, truth be told, I didn't know what else to do. Um, I was just someone who was like, I knew I needed to do something. So business just seemed like the safest
Yeah.
bet, and marketing was something that kind of appealed to me. And that I think was part of the problem of why
Yeah.
I wasn't really thriving in life because I didn't really know what I wanted. So I just did something until I could figure it
Hmm.
out. I think that's a problem that a lot of young people are facing now because if I look back to the start of my career, I
Yeah.
was at that age where I needed to pay my dues, I needed to get experience, but at the same time, I didn't really know what that looked like. And that's why I was very much looking back, floundering.
Yeah. I tell people, Byron, that the reason why we haven't been able to start our process and our life as far as when one is circular is because we haven't decided exactly what we want to do yet. And you're talking about it. You know, we just do things just to do it. I call it our default living, and we do it. You know, all of us are guilty of it, and but we didn't really decide exactly what we wanted, and so life just begins to become this tedious thing where we began to burn ourselves out because we're not paying attention to the major part of who we are. So here you are, you're in that field, you are, as you said, you have come to the space where you burn out. You had a incident with your dad that kind of, began to awaken you to the fact that there is more. When you began to experience these burnouts, talk to us as to what did that state look like mentally to you, even though you had this little glimpse that life is a little more than just the default decision making and living, if you will.
Yeah. Like, yeah, I wish I could sit here and say to you that after the cancer experience, like I had this big wake up call and everything changed overnight. But like
Hmm.
going back to where I was, like I
Yeah.
was so stuck and unhappy that every single day was a battle to get through. I remember just being in a job where every single morning I had to pull myself out of bed. Like I had periods where I was so depressed I just didn't want to leave the house. Like I was just so weighed down by all of these things going
Wow.
on. And that was why, looking back, I was my own worst enemy because I knew what I needed to do to turn my life around, but I was kept sabotaging and taking one step
Hmm.
forward, two steps back, and everything from my health to my relationships, my professional success. And it's only now that I reflect on it that I see how much I was actually the stumbling block in the way. And it was only when I really started making a decision of, do you know what, I need to figure out what's going on here and diving into the mindset and psychology behind why we think and behave the way that we do. Like it really uncover, okay, this is actually what's holding me back. And that was the first step in allowing me to move through
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah, that's powerful stuff, man, because I tell people that's the key right there. I call it I call it the day of our visitation, man. When we have that um, split second alone time, it's probably the first time in our life that we are now, and I call that space enlightenment. And to me, enlightenment means that you and I have just begun the journey of learning who we are, and that journey is to become better students of ourselves. And as we become students of ourselves, I think that's enlightenment to me, because as we begin to see us, we can then, Byron, relate to others based on our revelation and the insights that we started to get inside of ourselves. We see that this can help others. So here you are, you because I know I tell people uh, personal development is not a straight line. Just like flying a plane, it's not a straight line from one destination to the other. There's turbulence, and you have to learn how to manage yourself with the turbulence. But the plane has one thing, and it is a compass, and that's what everyone needs to find. What is your compass? So here you are, Byron, you're moving through, and you mentioned that you are in a state of depression, and that's a dark place to be. And the fact that you are pushing yourself to get up to go to work, um, man, that's a lot of people. Walk with them here for a minute and talk to them, encourage them as to beginning to take that first step that you took, if you will.
yeah. I think the big thing that changed for me was just realizing that I had to do something different because when you're in that mental state, you just kind of accept it and try and push through. Because for that like period of
Yeah.
my life, like I didn't have a choice. Like I had bills to pay and I enjoy eating, so I like had to go to work and earn
Yeah.
money. So as unhappy as I was, I still needed to follow through. But it was only when I like
Yeah.
just had a conversation with myself and I was like, you know what, you can't go on like this, you need to find something different. And that was when I really started
Yeah.
making choices of, okay, I need to start taking action to get out of here. What are the small things that I can do every single day that will allow me to turn it around? Because I find a lot of people are their own worst enemy as they try and do too much too soon. You see
Yes.
it all the time. Like if I use a really easy to follow health example, you see someone who's struggling with their weight and they wake up on a Monday morning and they're like, I'm going to do everything different. I'm going to stop eating junk food. I'm going to spend every day in the gym. I'm going to do all these things. And by Wednesday, it's too much and they crash and burn. And this is why, regardless of the changes you want to make in your life, I'm such a big believer you have to break it down. Yes, have a big vision of where you're trying to get to, but then think about, okay, what actions do I need to take today, even if they feel small, that are going to allow me to move forward?
Yeah.
Because when you can be consistent with that over 2, 4, 6, 8 months, you can have made this huge amount of progress that's not going to have felt like you've pushed yourself too hard. Like that's how it's sustainable.
Yeah, guys, you're listening to this. That is a powerful insight that you must assimilate into your life in order to move forward. Um, Most people are stagnant because they're not doing exactly what was just said. So I want you guys to pay attention to this conversation. There is some good stuff right there. Say you hear you're beginning to make that decision to step out. What were some of those tools did you bring into your life, to your mindset, to now help you to continue moving one step at a time? What was one of those tools that you, if you can remember, Byron, that you brought into your space to help you out?
Yeah. So my one's a little bit of an interesting one because it was less so about tools and more of actually finding what I wanted to do. You see, kind of growing up, I never really had an
Hmm.
interest in health. I was quite overweight. I never really looked after myself. And after my dad's cancer, I had this realization that that was the thing I needed to fix. The next couple of years, I really struggled. I
Yeah.
like, as anyone who's ever tried to get healthy can probably knows, it's just like this one step forward, two steps back cycle. And I just reached a point where I got frustrated by it. I was like, you know what? If I'm going to do this, I'm going to figure out how to do it properly. So I became a student of everything from nutrition to fitness and changing behaviors. And the more I learned about it, the more I learned about how to actually
Hmm.
get my body functioning properly and get lasting results. In the end, I went on and I lost over 50 pounds. I got into really good shape. And I saw so many other people who were struggling like I was. And I was like, you know what? What I want to do here is help these people. I was like, I've gone through this entire process. I've figured out how to do it. I want to pass on what I've learned. And that for me
Yeah.
was the big like epiphany moment where I was like, I want to take all of this. I want to write a book. I want to start coaching people and running workshops. And that was in the path that I dived into. So the thing that really turned it around for
Hmm.
me was finding something that excited me to get out of bed in the morning. It was something that actually I wanted to follow through with. And that was when it started became easier actually to
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah. It's old adage that says find your purpose and you'll become purposeful. It's really interesting um, when you do find that, and you it has to be something that you love, enjoy, that you can do. I tell people you do 40 hours a day and you're still excited about doing it. So, it means that you're doing it all day long. And people look at you, are you tired? And you're like, no, I'm loving this. So here you are, you've walked through and you saw the need and the opportunity to be able to become what I call the ultimate prize that we get while we're here on this planet, and that is to become a servant. Here you are, after you've gone through this particular aspect of your life, which is a big one, Byron, because a lot of people out there are struggling with this. We have industries that are making billions of dollars on this. And so you had found and located the Alexa, if you will, of success within that space. How did you begin to approach people to bring them in and educate them about the process so that they can get the same results that you did?
So for me, my entire business, I primarily grew off of social media. And it was just like adding video and
Hmm.
content and meeting people where they're at. And I also had the opportunity to do a lot of workshops and events and just go and just share my message. But the interesting thing for me, and this very much actually brings it on to my new book, because one of the biggest things I've seen over the
Yeah.
last few years is most people know what they need to do, but they're not doing it. And this is something
Hmm.
that I struggled with
Yeah.
myself, and I saw in so many people. Like I could provide them with all the information that they needed, but if they didn't follow through, it was pointless.
Hmm.
And that was so. This is something that's really fascinated me
Yeah.
over the last decade. It was really understanding like why people are not following through, like why are people not being consistent or taking action. And that was really where I started diving into the whole mindset behind it, where I discovered that there's actually 7 mental blocks that cause people to get in their own way and
Hmm.
sabotage themselves. Like these are the reasons why people are not creating the life that they want. And that was actually why the last few years I've been so focused on this next book and venture, because I was like, we need to get people to stop sabotaging themselves, because until they actually get out of their own head and start taking action, nothing else matters. So that was really where I got to the point of like, this is the
Yeah.
big barrier that we need to break through.
Excellent. If you can give them a teaser, and we're going to talk about that later on as well, to delve in a little more as to what did you find out of those 7 principles that you have discovered. Take one of them, take your first one, and let's talk a little about that because again, we know and the statistics when it comes to people that New Year's resolution and come February um, they've lost focus. They're nowhere achieving anything at all in whatever aspect of life they made that they released that you know New Year's resolution about. Talk to us about what did you discover and how did you begin to um, use it, if you will, in your life?
Yep. So I found that out of the 7 barriers that hold us back, the biggest one that causes us to get in our own way is fear.
Mm,
It's like we know what we want, but we're afraid of what's going to happen, whether it's that we're going to get rejected, we're going to fail, we're not going to be good enough. So often that fear can build up to the point that it paralyzes us and it stops us from taking action. And one of the biggest realizations I had after my dad's cancer was how much of my own life that I wasted watching from the sidelines. And the biggest thing that drives me is regret. And that's why I found that one of the most powerful ways
yeah.
to overcome fear is to reframe it. We need to tip the scale in the other direction. Rather than focusing on the fear of what could go wrong, we have to frame it in a way of what are we going to miss out on if we never put ourselves out there? What happens if we reach the end of our life and we never went after our goals? What happens if we don't take action in our business and we can't provide for our family? What happens if we don't share our message or help the people who need us most? When we suddenly make it more painful not to take action, that's when it becomes easier to follow through,
Mm.
because we have to break that fear down, understand where it's coming from, and then really reframe it in a way that we can control it.
Yeah, I think that's the key. And I would tell my sons and even myself as I began to learn from personal development, the principles that the shift in perspective is it's an easy, small shift, but it brings big impact. But like you said, what holds us back is that fearful programming that we had, whatever it is for, as you mentioned, mine was one of the things of failing and stuff like that. And I had to bring in meditation and I would walk myself and say, okay, what does that look like? I mean, and how do you, what is your goal? What do you want? And so as I began to answer those questions, I began to strip away all of the nonsense and I became focused and I knew exactly what it is. And as you said earlier, you began to take the steps. But I find out that self sabotaging is something that a lot of people have to deal with, whether it's personal or in the business world. And you had mentioned that you deal with a lot of CEOs and so forth. And uh, I've never seen so much self sabotaging like I do in businesses, man. So talk
Yeah.
to us as you began to understand this aspect of fear, and that's a big one, man. That is a big one. There's, I would say, maybe about the majority of people are just trapped there. Walk with them a little, comfort them, if you will, Byron, about that step of releasing it, that fearfulness, and just tapping into the unknown, if you will, because that's where you have to do. Talk to them and try and walk
Yeah.
someone through that.
So it starts by you really accepting that the life that you want to be living is on the other side of that fear. Because the fact that you've got fear over what you want is actually a
Yeah.
good thing. Because if you don't have any fear, that's a sign that you're playing too small. So you having fear over it shows that you're growing and you're pushing yourself in the right direction. But one big piece of advice I'd love to give to anyone listening to this is the biggest reason I found that most people don't achieve their goals is they focus too much on what they want and they don't figure out who they need to become in order to make it happen. And the reason why this is so important is every new level of success brings with it a new level of problems, which is why your current way of doing things, your habits, your behaviors, what you did to get you to where you are, isn't going to be able to achieve at the next level of success. And if anything, it's the exact reason why you're stuck. This is why every new level of success needs a new level of you. And that's why you need to take that vision of what you want to achieve and you need to ask yourself, what does the version of me who made that happen look like? Really get a mental image in your mind. And
Yeah.
then with that, you have to reverse engineer it and break it down. Really ask yourself, that version of me, what habits did they develop? What behaviors did they create? What routines do they have? What do they do in order to get them to where they are? That's going to show you the exact life that you need to start living in order to get to where you want to be. And the reason why this is so powerful is you need to then, when you're faced with
That's the key.
situations where, yeah, yeah. But when you're in situations where you don't want to take action, let's say you're procrastinating, you're worried about fear, whatever it is, you need to ask yourself, what would the person I want to become do right now? Would they make excuses? Would they put it off?
Mm.
Or would they push themselves to follow through even if they don't want to? The reason why I love this is it gets you out of your own current way of doing things. You're no longer relying on your current thought patterns or what you feel like doing. Instead, you're
Yeah.
making decisions based on the person you want to become. You start doing this, and that's how you're going to build your confidence. It's how you're going to create momentum. And it's how over time you actually evolve yourself into that next level version of yourself.
Yeah, that's the key, man. As I mentioned earlier, that is without what you had just explained, you're never going to achieve anything. You're not going to get there. It is not. You have to fix you, and as you make the alignment with you, um, uh, that's where the power is. The things that you want will manifest based on you. And once you make the adjustments, and you'll see, because as you begin to change into that future you, you actually become that person, and then you are able to bring those things that you're pulling into your space. But you have to make that switch, and you have to recognize that that is the key in order for you to get what you want. So here you are, you're getting these things, you're learning, you're practicing it, you're out there and you're teaching and all of these things. And I want you to talk to us now as to your personal life as you are moving forward in your life, Byron, and you're gaining, your serving. How did you begin to live, and how did you begin to feed yourself, if you will, in your personal growth as you're moving through and expending all of your wisdom as you are feeding it and releasing it to others? How did you begin to feel, and how did you continue to grow?
Yeah. So I was having a conversation with someone else about this the other day, and we were talking about the definition of success. And for them, they were very money
Mm,
driven, which is fine. Like I have nothing against people going for money and wanting to achieve amazing goals. But the definition of success for me is be able to go to bed at night, knowing that I spent my time with the people I wanted to spend it with, doing the things that I wanted to do, and actually doing work that made the world a better place. And that's why my entire vision has been around building a business where I can actually know that I'm helping others, where I can know that there's a positive impact on the world. And that's what I've built everything else at over the last decade. It's all been going back to the single mission of not wanting to allow people who are
yeah.
struggling like I was to carry on feeling that way, to give them the push they need to turn their life around. So whether it's been through my books, my speaking, my courses, or coaching, it's all about helping people get to that next level. Like that's what really excites me. It's about teaching people how to actually get out of their own way. Like that's what gives me fulfillment in life and makes me want to get out of bed in the morning.
Yeah, that is awesome, man. Take another principle out of your seven. I know the first one that you talked about, which is the major one, and I absolutely believe you. I think the same. I think that is the major belief system that one needs to change, our perspective of how we're looking at things. And you were talking about switching that conversation in your thought. As you switch that conversation, you are changing the conversation. Pull out another principle, if you will, and bring it to us so that we can begin to get a flavor of what some of these self sabotaging principles look like within one's life.
Yeah, so there's several ones we could dive into from like worrying about problems that haven't happened yet or making decisions based on what you want now instead of what you want most. But just going back to the theme of your podcast, I think probably the most powerful one to dissect is the idea of being too hard on yourself. Because I think every single one of us has
Hmm.
this tendency to have such crazy standards and expectations for ourselves that we never feel like we're enough. And while being your own harshest
Yeah.
critic is no doubt a great motivator, the problem that I see that comes in is so many people, no matter what they do, they always feel like they're failing or like they could have done better. And they just go into this
Yeah.
never ending self sabotaging cycle where they just beat themselves up and feel guilty for what they're doing. And the reality is, if you are always in that headspace where nothing is ever enough, you're just going to be in a never ending battle where you're going to be questioning your confidence and self worth. And ultimately, you're never going to be happy. So, on this whole like threads of enlightenment journey, you have to learn to balance your big ambitions and the person you want to become with self-compassion of knowing when you're doing your best. Because at the end of the day, you're only human. And while it's great that you want to keep pushing yourself, I'm not saying lower your goals or your standards. You've got to know when you've actually put in the work and be like, that's okay. It wasn't perfect, but you did your best in
Yeah.
being at peace with it.
Yeah. I think I tell people all the time that perfection is one of the enemies of personal development, personal develop, and loving the self, because we have this. I don't know where it comes from, because perfection to everyone is different, and so when we get to perfection, we then someone will come to us and look at what we believe is perfect and bring out a flaw, and so that will set off that cycle one more time. And that's why I've always been fascinated with the Japanese culture, with everything has to be perfect, and the mindset and what it does to someone. So here you are. I love that, in the fact of telling them that you need to be kind to yourself. That's one of the strongest principles. I always said you need to speak to yourself and be kind, because if you are not kind to you, how do you expect someone to be kind to you? And how are you going to recognize when someone is not kind to you? Those are the identifiers. So you'll get to know how you treat you. It will determine how you let someone else treats you. So this is very powerful what Byron has just said. Make sure that you focus on that aspect, and not to look at yourself in such a fashion. Just look at yourself. The answers are there. You just have to learn the tools, how to utilize it to get the answers. Now, talk to us as picture I'm a client. I just showed up, Byron. I'm a mess. You know, let's say I'm all over the place. I don't even know my name. I'm coming into your office or your space, YouTube or your social media thing. I contact you. I'm like, I need some help. Um, I am I'm falling apart. Uh, Walk me through some of what's your process, if you will, with someone when you have a client and when they come to you to seek wisdom and guidance.
Yeah. So the first thing I actually teach all new clients is how to actually start taking back control of their life. Because what I found is that for the majority of us, we spend our life in a state of mind where life is happening to us. We're going throughout the day, challenges are coming, fires are coming up, and we're just constantly in this state of reaction. And the problem with that is when you're constantly reacting, you're being driven by emotion. And this is why a lot of the time people spiral and
Yeah.
feel out of control. And that's why, for me, you have to master the state of mind where when something goes wrong, you can stop, process what's happening, understand what's going on, and then choose how you respond to it. Because when someone is in that mess headspace, or they're overwhelmed, or they're stressed, they're making decisions based on emotion. And that is a lot of the time going to make things worse.
Hmm.
Whereas at the end of the day, it's a big difference between a reaction and a response. A reaction is impulsive, whereas a response is
Yeah.
calculated and controlled. And that's why this mindset training is, I believe, one of the most powerful mental shifts that anyone can make. And it's actually a free resource that I give out. Like, for anyone who does want to start this journey of self development or leveling up their mindset, if you go on my website, I've actually got something called the Next Level Mindset video series. You just type in your email and it gives you instant access for free. And it goes through the exact mindset training that I teach all of my private clients on session number one. Like, this and this alone is such a powerful shift in getting you out of that reactive space so that you can start taking control of your life. Like, it does take about 30 to 35 minutes to go through. So obviously I can't like break it all down now. But anyone who does want to dive into that more,
Yeah.
just go to byronmorrison.com and you can get it for free. Like, that would be what I would tell anyone to start with.
Excellent. I'm actually going to provide it for them. You guys that are listening to this conversation, Byron has just been laying out a roadmap basically for you to get a chance to see the process by which you can move from one space to the other. Those that are in businesses and stuff like that, he's laying it out, man. And I'm so glad that he's here. And I'm going to make sure that we have all of those links and stuff like that so you can reach him and get some help and some guidance from him. Any type of information like that is good for you to begin to fine tune the things that you want and how you want to get there. So, talk to us about. I know your book is coming out in shortly. You have several out there, and talk to us how you migrated from going through all of this stuff, and you decided. I know you said when you came through the weight issue, you said, "Let me put it in a book," and all of these different things. From that space of learning and all of stuff, how was your migration to the books, and how did you manage yourself in that? Because I know you got to make some adjustments as well, dealing with a couple of issues. How did you manage yourself there, Byron, once you began to put that information in a format by which you can now serve others with?
Yeah, so for me, it was just a natural evolution. My business coaching for the last few years has been focused on CEOs and entrepreneurs, but the reason why that became
Hmm.
the primary kind of area I was serving is when I started my first company, even though I was great at the coaching aspect, truth be told, I was completely in over my head when it came to running a company. I didn't know how to manage people. I didn't know how to
Yeah,
lead teams. I didn't know how to deal with conflicts. And I just found myself in a situation where I was burnt out and overwhelmed. And I knew that I needed to figure out how to get this under control. So I spent the next couple of years learning everything I could about
yeah,
psychology, mindset, high performance, dealing with people, and everything else in between to figure out how to become an effective leader. Um, as a side effect of that, I got my own business under control. And at the time, I was working with a lot of entrepreneurs and
hmm,
business owners on their health and life challenges. And naturally, these issues started coming up. And I figured out that helping them navigate them was not only my superpower, it's what I love to do. So that was where my business naturally evolved from the health aspect to more of the business and CEO performance
yeah.
angle. But throughout all of that, the one thing that came back, regardless as to whether I was working with a CEO or a mother who was struggling with her weight, it was back to that self sabotaging mindset. It was like people knowing what they need to do, but not doing it. It's something that I've seen universally across the board from the people I've worked with in 15 different countries, that this is the biggest thing holding us back. And that's why it's been the core of my business for the last 10 years is helping people with that mindset. So through all of my books, it's been this natural progression building to the newest one of really taking everything that I've learned to help people get out of their own way.
Yeah, that is good stuff. All of you young or even old entrepreneurs that you are in, you started your business and maybe whatever small business you think it is, and you're trying to manage yourself. I got someone right here that is able to help you. And all of you that are listening that are just starting your business and trying to find some guidance, and here's Byron. He's going to be able to walk you through and so that you will be a successful business owner, but also that you would be a successful person, an individual, because you have to have the individual in line for the business to manifest. So I want you guys to get into his space and again, um, learn from him. And the books, I tell people, every time you buy a book from an author, you're having a one-on-one private time with that author, and you're able to assimilate the the energy that is within those words into your space, into your being, to help propel you out of your situation and get you started. Um, Byron, I want to thank you for coming to Threads of Enlightenment. This has been a good one, man. Thank you so much.
And thank you for having me here. I really appreciate the time.
Thank you, sir.